So you finally put up a new fence. Fresh cedar, straight posts, the whole run looking sharp. And the guy at the hardware store sent you home with a $50 jug of sealant and one piece of advice. Put a coat on now, then reapply every single year, forever, or watch it rot. That is the deal most Americans have accepted without ever questioning it. Your fence is a subscription. You pay the sealant tax every spring for the rest of your life, and the fence still goes gray and soft at the posts by year 10. Here is the part nobody at that store is going to tell you. The oldest wooden building on the planet is a temple in Japan called Horyuji. It has been standing for about 1,300 years. 13 centuries of rain, snow, humidity, and earthquakes. And nobody has ever painted it or sealed it. Not once. Meanwhile, your fence needs a fresh coat before the second summer. The difference is not the weather. Japan is wet. It has a rainy season that would embarrass Seattle. The difference is that the Japanese worked out how to stop wood from rotting before it starts, and they did it something like 800 years ago, using a method the sealant industry has spent decades trying to talk you out of, because there is no annual refill in it to sell you. That is what this video is about. Not how to rescue a fence that is already falling apart, how to build one, or finish the one you just put up, so that rot never gets a foothold in the first place. No paint, no stain, no standing in the yard every spring with a brush and a bad attitude. Stay with me, because almost all of it comes down to 4 decisions you make on day 1. Get them right and you are done thinking about your fence for the next 40 years. Before we go on, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far this story travels. And if you're loving it so far, join the family by hitting subscribe, because tomorrow we've got something special lined up just for you. Start with the wood, because most fences are doomed before the first board goes up. Walk into a big box store, and the cheapest fencing is green lumber, milled while it was still full of water, and loaded on the truck before it ever dried. It looks fine on the shelf. Then you build with it, and over the next few months it dries out in your yard, and as it dries it shrinks, twists, cups, and splits along the grain. Every one of those splits is an open door for water. You did not build a fence. You built a rack of future firewood that happens to be standing up. A Japanese carpenter would never do this. The traditional fencing woods over there are sugi, which is Japanese cedar, and hinoki, which is Japanese cypress. Both are full of natural oils that fungus and insects will not touch. But the species matters less than what the carpenter does before he builds anything. The wood gets dried, stacked with spacers so air moves between every board, left alone for months, until the moisture inside drops to around 12%. Only then does it get used. The village carpenter picked his boards a season ahead and let them sit. That patience is not fussiness. It is the whole reason the fence lasts. You do not have to import Japanese cypress. Western red cedar, cypress, redwood, and black locust are all naturally rot-resistant and easy to find. The one step you cannot skip is the drying. Buy kiln-dried boards if you can, or let your cedar sit stacked and spaced under cover for a few weeks before you build. And before anyone tells me the pressure-treated stuff is already rot-proof, pressure-treated pine resists rot at the core, sure, but it still soaks up surface water, still checks and splits as it dries, and still gives out at the post base like everything else. The treatment buys you time. It does not change the physics. Now the finish, and this is where the no paint, no sealant promise actually comes true. You have 2 real options, and both work on a principle that has nothing to do with anything on the paint aisle. The first is the old one. It is called YAKISUGI, sometimes Shosugiban, and it goes back about 400 years. You take a torch to the face of each cedar board and scorch it until the surface turns to a thin layer of black carbon, roughly a 1/16 of an inch deep. Then you brush off the loose ash with a wire brush and rub in a light coat of natural oil. That is the whole finish. And here is why it prevents rot instead of just delaying it. Rot needs 3 things: moisture, oxygen, and something to eat. The fire turns the surface sugars and cellulose, the exact stuff fungus feeds on, into carbon, which nothing can digest. Water beads off it. Sunlight cannot break it down because it is already burned. Insects will not bore into it. You have not laid down a coating that will crack and peel in a year. You have turned the wood itself into something rot has no way to grab. A YAKISUGI fence lasts 80 to 100 years with nothing more than a light re-oil every decade or so. Modern decay and fire research backs up every bit of this. Charred cedar shows real, measurable resistance to fungal rot, sun damage, and insect attack that no painted board will ever come close to, which is why the technique keeps turning up on expensive modern houses in the States right now. You can buy pre-charred boards from a specialty supplier for $8 to $12 a square foot, or do the same thing yourself in the backyard with a hardware store torch for almost nothing. A Japanese village did this by hand in 1790, and it still works exactly as well today. If open flame in your yard is not your idea of a relaxing Saturday, the second option gets you most of the way there. A penetrating oil finish. Pure tung oil, raw linseed oil, or a commercial penetrating finish like Penofin. Rub it into the bare wood along the grain, let it soak in for 20 minutes, and wipe off whatever the wood did not drink. The gap between this and sealant is the whole point. Sealant, paint, and film-forming stains sit on top of the wood as a skin, and when the wood swells and shrinks with every rain, the skin cannot move with it and cracks. Water slips under the crack, and now the coating is trapping moisture against the wood instead of keeping it out. That is why the sealant fails, and why it takes your weekend with it. Penetrating oil does the opposite. It sinks into the fibers and protects from the inside while leaving the surface open enough to breathe, so moisture can still leave when the weather dries. One light coat a year, and you are done. Quick question while we are here, and drop it in the comments. Is your fence brand new, a couple years old, or already giving you trouble? I want to know who I am talking to. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Here is the decision that saves more fences than any finish, and almost nobody gets it right. The post base. This is where fences actually die. Not in the middle of a board, not at the top. At ground level, in the 6 inches on either side of the soil line, where you cannot see the damage until the whole post is leaning. The reason is simple. Rot needs trapped moisture, and a post set straight into the dirt sits in wet earth 24 hours a day. Wood that never gets a chance to dry out will rot no matter what you finished it with. So the American instinct is to pour a fat collar of concrete around the post to lock it in place. And I already know this is the part where half the comments are going to tell me concrete is the only correct way to set a post. Here is the problem with it. Concrete does not drain. It forms a bowl around the base of the post that catches every drop of rain running down the wood and holds it there against the grain. You did not protect the post, you built it a little bathtub. The Japanese fix, and the fix good fence builders use everywhere, is to let the water leave. Dig the post hole deeper than you need and drop 4 to 6 inches of gravel in the bottom before the post goes in. Set the post on that gravel so the end grain at the very bottom can drain instead of standing in a puddle. If you use concrete for stability, crown the top of it so it slopes away from the post like a tiny roof, throwing water outward instead of pooling it against the wood. And right at the soil line, keep an air gap. Japanese carpenters have set their posts up off the wet earth with a small gap for airflow for over 1,000 years, because they understood the one thing every fence company forgot. Wood dries in moving air, wood drains under flowing water, and rot only takes hold where moisture has nowhere to go. A fraction of an inch of air at the base is the difference between a post that lasts 15 years and one that lasts 70. Then there is the top of the post, which most people never think about until the crack has already opened. Cut a post flat across the top and you leave the end grain, the cut ends of all those fibers, pointing straight up at the sky. End grain drinks water like a bundle of straws. Rain sits on the flat top, soaks down into the core, and rots it from the inside, where no finish can reach. A flat post top is a funnel aimed at the heart of your fence. A Japanese carpenter caps every post. A small angled cedar cap, usually a simple bevel with a slight overhang on all 4 sides, so water runs off and clears the post instead of soaking in. You can cut a stack of them in an afternoon with a miter saw out of scrap cedar, a couple dollars of wood per cap, and the post tops stop being the failure point they almost always are. Sealing end grain from above is half the fight against rot, and it is the half nobody does. 2 small things finish the job. Keep the bottom rail and boards up off the ground with an inch or 2 of gap underneath, so nothing wicks moisture straight up out of the soil. and if you are running solid boards, a hair of space between them lets air move through and dry both faces. A fence that can breathe never stays wet long enough to rot. One more piece makes all of this work, and it is free. Timing. Wood only takes a finish properly when it is dry and the weather is mild. The window you want is a warm, dry day in spring or early autumn, with the wood between 60 and 80 degrees. The fibers are open, the wood is thirsty, and the oil sinks right in. Do your charring in autumn when the air is drier and fire risk is lower. Never oil or char in cold or wet weather, because wood full of moisture cannot absorb anything, and the finish will just sit on the surface staying tacky for weeks. Most people seal their fence on the first warm weekend of the year, when the wood is still damp from spring rain, which is half the reason the finish gives out inside 2 seasons. So what does the upkeep look like once the fence is built right? Almost nothing. If you went the oil route, 1 light coat a year on a dry spring day, and a quick look at the post bases to check the drainage is still clear. If you went the YAKISUGI route, you can skip even that for years, and just refresh the oil over the char every 10 to 15 years. The whole yearly session is a Saturday morning with a rag and a cup of coffee. Let us talk money, because this is where it stops being close. A gallon of pure tung oil runs around $40 and covers a 100-foot fence with plenty left over. Add a rag and a brush, a few bags of gravel for the bases, and scrap cedar for the caps, and your whole finishing and drainage setup comes in under $100, with yearly upkeep after that under $30. Now run the other math. Sealant every 2 or 3 years is $150 to $400 a cycle in materials, plus the weekends. And when the treadmill finally loses and the fence has to come down, replacing it for an average yard runs somewhere between $4,000 and $12,000. Prevention is cheaper on day 1, and the gap only widens. The sealant is not protecting your fence, it is protecting the sealant company's next sale. Here is the whole sequence if you are building this season. Get your wood dry first, kiln dried or stacked and spaced under cover for a few weeks. Set the posts on gravel, and if you use concrete, crown it so it sheds water. Cut and fit the caps. Then pick a dry, mild day and finish the boards, either a slow, even pass of the torch followed by a wire brush and a wipe of oil, or just oil rubbed into the bare wood. 20 minutes to soak, wipe off the excess. That is the entire job. From then on, once a year, a light coat and a glance at the bases, and your fence work is handled for the next 40 years. The real lesson here is not about cedar or torches or oil. It is about a way of thinking. The American approach to a fence was shaped by companies that make their money on the next coat, so the fence becomes a thing you manage forever, a small battle you lose a little more of every spring. The Japanese approach starts from the other end. Build it right one time. Pick wood that resists rot, dry it before you use it, seal it once by fire or from within, and shape every joint so water runs off and air gets in. Solve the problem at the start, and you do not spend the next 40 years managing it. A carpenter in a Japanese village would not call any of this clever. He would call it normal. Built the right way on day 1, your fence just stands there and does its job for longer than you will own the house. That's the story, for now. If you found it worth your time, subscribing and hitting the bell costs you nothing and helps more than you'd think. Another one's coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.